A dog barked at the priest, surrounded by the crowd. What he hid under his cassock shocked everyone. Dogs are our most loyal companions and can help us discover hidden sides of ourselves in a very special way. Through their unwavering loyalty and love, they encourage us to explore new paths and question ourselves. Their instinctive knowledge of our needs can help us look deep inside ourselves and recognize our true feelings. So dogs are not only our best friends, but also true soul savers. But sometimes dogs discover completely different sides of people. Now and then, they notice that someone is up to something, even though hundreds of other people are present who don't suspect anything at all. This is the story of Father Ricardo and Samson, a dog which shows us what our four-legged friends are capable of doing. Samson had been brought to the service at the local chapel by a member of the congregation. This was not just any dog. Samson was trained to detect illegal substances. Illegal substances include some substances, but drugs and explosives are the most well known. So when such a dog strikes, it often does not bode well. And when a dog like Samson suddenly starts barking at the man of God, it can mean that the whole community is facing a shocking scandal. And this is exactly what happened. Father Ricardo was giving his sermon, and suddenly Samson began to bark and growl. In the otherwise so peaceful church congregation, immediately arose bright excitement. "Get this filthy animal out of my church immediately!" shouted Father Ricardo angrily. Samson now began pacing excitedly in front of the altar. The screaming father had aroused Samson's suspicions even more. Samson was quite an imposing dog with a shoulder height of at least 50 centimeters. The priest, who had earlier loudly demanded that the animal be removed from the church, panicked and fled to one of the pews in the nave. "Get that demon out of here! This beast has no business in this holy place. This is the house of the Lord and not the house of a wild beast," he shouted. His pitch was loud and angry, but his fear was also clear. The other members of the community were unsettled and did not dare to approach Samson for fear of being bitten by him. Then suddenly, a loud but calm voice rose from the congregation, which, despite the general commotion, could be clearly understood because of its strength and clarity. "The beast, as you call it, has a name. His name is Samson," the voice said. The congregation members aligned their faces with the source of the voice and could thus see that these words were spoken by a young man. He looked much younger than the strong voice had initially suggested. To some of those present, this young man was known as Juliano. "What do I care what the beast's name is?" the priest hissed. Samson calmed down during the dialogue, and the fact that Samson now seemed less aggressive, some members of the Christian community took advantage to leave the church in a hurry, out of the church, out of the reach of this presumably homicidal dog. But the resulting commotion again caused Samson to start barking and growling aggressively. Therefore, although some members of the congregation managed to escape from the church, many people remained inside the building. Samson, meanwhile, was running around as if to prevent the other congregation members from leaving the church as well. Some visitors to the service climbed onto the pews in fear. Some even tried to find refuge in the confessional. "Do you know that Samson is a police dog trained to find banned substances?" asked Juliano. His face was transfixed with seriousness. Father Ricardo remained silent. He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and began punching in a number. "Put the cell phone away," the father ordered him. Juliano looked at him with an expression of superiority on his face. It was noticeable that Father Ricardo was highly nervous, and more the remaining members of the parish were noticing. "Father Ricardo, if Samson strikes like he is now, it must mean there are illegal substances here in this church," Juliano said. Illegal substances? As those words fell, a murmur went through the congregation. Samson was still barking incessantly. More unrest now arose in the congregation. But if this unrest had been caused by fear of Samson before, now the voices that had something to say to Father Ricardo increased. A woman from the community said that she had suspected since her childhood that something was wrong with Father Ricardo. She had always had doubts, she said, and now she saw them confirmed. Other members of the parish agreed with her, some verbally, some with a nod. Another woman was stunned. "No, this can't be. I always believed he was such a kind-hearted person, our Father Ricardo. He is a man of God." The woman was so upset she threatened to lose consciousness. Juliano noticed this and rushed to her, and just in time he was able to catch the shocked woman before she collapsed. Samson followed Juliano and calmed down. Father Ricardo took the opportunity to step in front of the altar. He spread his arms before the crucified Jesus and said, "Lord, what have I done to you? What have I done to you that you punish me like this? That you send me a dog to bark at me? That you send me a dog that desecrates this holy place? That this dog makes my pious congregation believe that I am addicted to drugs? Why, O Lord, why are you doing this to me?" "Shut your mouth!" shouted a man from the parish who had known Father Ricardo since childhood, when he had attended catechism classes with the father. Father Ricardo looked at the man angrily. "I know Julian, and I know Samson too. If Samson strikes and you are not an addict yourself, then you're selling such substances. Or you're a smuggler, a human trafficker, or something else. In any case, you are not a pious man of the Lord," the man continued. Meanwhile, the woman whom Juliano had caught earlier regained consciousness. "It is not the dog that has turned out to be a beast, but our honorable father," she said, with a distinct mixture of anger and contempt in her voice. She then called for the other parishioners to escort Father to the police station. Father Ricardo still didn't seem to understand why his faithful parishioners thought he was a drug addict or even a drug dealer. He affirmed that he knew nothing of any drugs or any other illegal substances in the church, and asserted that he was an unconditionally devoted servant of God. "God is my witness," he vowed. "Maybe you're right, but in the 5 years of service, Samson has never once been wrong, which doesn't mean, of course, that there can never be a first time," said Juliano now, who had begun to have slight doubts about the reliability of Samson's sleuthing. He wondered if a priest could be so bold as to back up his protestations of innocence with the fact that God was his witness. This would have been an outrage probably unprecedented. "But he only struck at you, Father," Juliano added. By now, he had put a leash on Samson, thinking the situation was under control. He asked Father Ricardo to raise his hands to check him for possession of drugs. "You will have to ask God for forgiveness, every single person in this church," the father growled. "Shut up! They treated the Lord worse than they treated you," said the former catechism student. Juliano now took to searching the priest's clothes. Samson now stopped barking and sniffed with interest. "What do you have under the cassock?" asked Juliano sternly. Father Ricardo did not answer. Juliano made a move and pulled out a very small packet that had been hidden under the cassock. He glanced inside and immediately closed it again. "I must ask you to accompany me to the police station. You are under arrest," said Juliano coolly, and handcuffed the priest. Despite his protestations of innocence, the father was led away. Anger rose in the community. Objects flew at the father. The latter still maintained his innocence and explained that in the morning he had seen a boy named Jacinto in the church, who was a difficult boy from a troubled background. Neither Juliano nor the congregation believed the priest's protestations. Just as some angry people began physically attacking Father Ricardo, a youth entered the church. "He's right. I am Jacinto," the latter shouted. Juliano stopped, and there was dead silence in the church. "I have something to confess. I have always been an atheist, and I was looking for a way to harm the father," Jacinto explained in a calm voice. Jacinto now confessed to the assembled congregation that he had intentionally hidden a package of drugs under his cassock in such a way that the father would not immediately notice. He had done this, he said, to discredit the father, the church, and all of Christianity at the same time. He expressed regret and stated that he had not been aware of the consequences of his actions. He also addressed his family present in the church and asked for forgiveness. Juliano arrested Jacinto and instructed him on his rights, then took him to the police station. Despite everything, Father Ricardo visited him there in his cell on the evening of the same day and pronounced his blessings on him. What do you think of the community's behavior? Are the disappointment and anger understandable? Could you imagine being so angry in such a case that you would even physically attack the suspect? What do you think of Jacinto's behavior? Is he simply a vicious youth? Or did he simply not consider the serious consequences of his actions in his youthful recklessness? Feel free to write your answers in the comments and subscribe to this channel if you like this video.